Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and today we are going to be speaking with Maxwell, a young man who is on his way to federal prison, and he is going to talk with us a little bit about some of the challenges that he's faced while going through the criminal justice system, and more importantly, we're going to learn how he prepared for a best possible outcome. Maxwell, I want to thank you for taking this time to spend with us. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how much time you have left before you are going to be standing up for count in federal prison?
Well, Michael, it's a pleasure talking to you, and I have at this point likely less than 24 hours. So my turn-in date is tomorrow, and as Justin Paperny, who I've retained, recommended to be there after first count, so I'm going to be there sometime around noon.
Sometime around noon. So that's cool. You're working with my partner, Justin. I'm glad to hear that. But before we get into talking about Justin's work, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What kind of work do you do? And we'll start there. What kind of work do you do?
So I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades entrepreneur. I have a number of businesses on the retail side, dabble a little bit in real estate, a little bit in crypto now. But, it's sort of living the American dream, so to speak.
How long have you been in the United States? I detect an accent.
I have been in the United States since I was 12 years old, so it is going on my second decade, well past that.
So what are you now, about 35?
I am going to be 40 in prison. So I am 39 now, and I will turn 40 in Taft Correctional Institute.
So what brought you to the attention of the authorities?
So I had, I'm originally from Russia, and I had sort of been, as an immigrant, always in the Russian/Armenian community. And poor choices, poor association, trying to help people that perhaps I shouldn't have been helping.
Are you free to talk about it, or is that something that you'd rather keep secret? Tell us.
No. I mean, in general terms, basically, I had assisted some individuals in setting up some transactions, and it ended up being.
What kind of transaction?
It was a pharmaceuticals case, and it actually was a very large case. I had a very small role in it, but through my introductions, the authorities ended up obviously sweeping up everybody.
So when you say it's a pharmaceutical case, does that mean it's a violation of healthcare laws or Medicare fraud or wire fraud? What are we talking about?
So, I don't like to sound like, that the federal government somehow did me wrong. They didn't. When they charged me, they sort of like to charge everything. So I was charged with a litany of crimes, including money laundering, including racketeering, including sort of, the kit and caboodle. And that obviously was very different from
how long ago was that?
I had a little bit of experience with. I'm trying to see. This was a long time, 4 or 5 years ago now.
So that's an important data point.
Process.
That's an important data point that I think a lot of people should be thinking about if they are facing challenges with the criminal justice system. It sounds like this has been hanging over your head for several years. How were you able to cope and function during those several years, not knowing what was going to be the outcome of this criminal justice system?
I'm going to actually say something, to the listeners that I could have, in this very large case, have extended even longer. So I suspect that the very last people, may be looking at, 10 years by the time it's all said and done. So it's very stressful because, you sort of, after the arrest, you get the natural feelings of, angst and frustration and obviously nervousness about what's going to happen. But the problem becomes is that those feelings simply continue because the federal justice system in particular moves very slow.
I take it that you are a United States citizen now.
Yes, I am.
That's good. A lot of people who go into the system that have not yet taken the step of becoming a U.S. citizen find themselves in conditions that are not going to be as favorable as what you are going to experience at Taft camp. But you said that this happened 4 or 5 years ago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you responded to this news that you got charged with a federal crime? What steps did you take to prepare?
Well, I mean, initially, obviously, it was a little bit of shock for, myself and family. And you sort of try to dive right in, start looking for lawyers and you start doing all these, sort of all these things that, in retrospect, perhaps could have been done, with a little bit of more time and more care. And, perhaps I could have involved as many more people. Initially, I've only got turned into Justin during my sentencing phase. I didn't do as much research as I probably should have. I guess the one thing I would want to tell people is not to rush it. There's a lot of time that goes between when you're either charged or arrested, and by the time things really start crystallizing into what's going to happen.
Well, every case is different. I know that in your case, that's what happened. There are some people that do go through it in a rather accelerated time. What is important, I think, that you said is that they should do some research. You said that you didn't learn about where you could turn for resources until you were at the sentencing phase. And the truth is, the sooner you can get started in research and finding out what can you do to prepare for the best possible outcome, the better position that you put yourself in. When you started, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I was going to say that's actually very, very true. What ended up happening is, and you're right, obviously, this is just my experience. I don't know that, there may be people who've had, a much faster trip through the justice system, but you're 1,000% correct. And what I want to actually underline is the entire process. It is a process. It isn't like, get a lawyer and then do this and then think about sentencing and then think about prison. The reality is the sooner you start thinking about the totality of it and the totality of the outcomes, the easier and better the outcome will be. So, the piecemeal approach is very incorrect. And I did that a little bit, and it was to my detriment.
Tell us what you did when you started to research. What did you find, and what was helpful to you?
So what I ended up doing is immediately I started sort of, not having experience through the, federal system. Thank God, this was my first time. I started looking for lawyers because that's sort of, that's really the only experience most people have. They may have had some tickets, they may have had some, minor, perhaps DUI or something, some minor run-ins with the state level law. And their only experience is that the attorney handles everything. And what I've learned through this entire process is that isn't true at the federal level. And so when I just hired an attorney and I sort of thought that's the end all be all to my troubles, and I'm going to sort of let him handle everything, and I'm not going to worry about doing all this other research, and I'm not going to perhaps worry about sentencing, and I'm not going to perhaps worry about all these other steps, and he's just going to handle it for me. What I ended up learning is that he isn't going to handle it for you. And he's going to do his part, and if you do your research with an attorney, hopefully you'll hire a good one, and he's going to do that. But he is definitely not going to handle anything but being your attorney.
So let's talk a little bit about hiring an attorney. Are you comfortable? Were you happy with the performance of your attorney?
Had I had a little bit more information and more research, like I mentioned, just right now, I would have understood what his role was in this. And I likely would have been possibly happier with him. I'm not as happy as I could be. I think he did an excellent job. But also because I was under this mistaken impression that he's just going to hold my hand and, walk me through the gates, so to speak, I then had obviously felt a little bit of disappointment and I wasn't as happy. But I think a lot of that is more reflected about what I should have researched and how I should have approached it more than anything what he was supposed to do or did or didn't do.
Did you take a guilty plea, I presume?
Yes, I took a guilty plea without cooperation, and I then went through the whole sentencing process.
Are you comfortable letting our listeners know how much you spent on legal counsel for a guilty plea?
I had spent in excess of six figures.
So more than $100,000 to hire an attorney who would position you to plead guilty. And this is, I presume, one of the worst times in your life. What level of care did you spend in listening to you and understanding what your needs were and guiding you on steps that you could take to prepare for a successful journey?
So, like I said before, I don't want to sound repetitive, but he was an excellent attorney. He did his job, he did motions, and he did things in the legal scope of things. But as an overall scope and as an understanding sort of this, and you're correct in describing it as a journey or a process, it's very multifaceted. So he never really, and I don't know whether he's unaware of it. A lot of the videos that I watched from you and Justin, they don't hint at that, but they say that, the attorneys, because it's obviously a difficult job for them and they have to focus on the law and they have to focus on their little part in it, is that he simply didn't, he didn't do anything else. And it's not a knock on him, but, the reality is that he was attentive, but only in the context of that particular, the law, the deal, interactions with the DA, scheduling things, etc. But he was not, and again, I don't know whether he didn't know about it or whether that just simply wasn't his purview. He was not in any way advising me or preparing me for any of the multitude of steps that I probably should have been taken earlier than later.
That's one of the key points that I wanted you to bring out, is that, an attorney is certainly well-educated and very analytical. The attorney is going to be looking at the evidence against an individual and is going to analyze how is this going to play out in a courtroom or in a judicial proceeding. But for the defendant, this is the worst time of a person's life, and life is spinning out of control, and you're thinking about losing your liberty and being separated from your family. And during those times, what you really need is a guide, somebody who can listen and advise what steps can you take to get forward. And I'm really glad that you did some research and you were able to find some guides to help you. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you found helpful? And we'd like to hear that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to help more people, and we want to provide more guidance to individuals who are going through it. And so I'd like to hear from you what worked for you and what could we have done better?
So I got turned on to Justin pretty late in the process. I was already past my plea deal, and I was well on my way into sentencing and things of that nature. And so I was a little bit behind the eight ball in starting to prepare for these things that, realistically my attorney had, I don't want to say he had bad advice regarding that, but in retrospect, I see that his focus was on just being my attorney. So for listeners, especially, you're going to get a lot of this, and perhaps my experience is common, and perhaps it isn't, but watching some of your videos, I believe that it is pretty common, is your attorney and mine did the same thing. They may even advise you not to speak at your sentencing, or they may advise you, as I prepared my remarks to the judge, they may look at those and say, well, this seems like you're admitting too much stuff and you took a plea deal, perhaps you shouldn't do that. And knowing that I didn't listen to him because I listened to Justin and your videos, I got a very favorable sentencing. People should be cognizant that it's that process past the point of once you've already taken a plea, it moves into a different sort of area. And that's a process that other people should be helping you with, not just your attorney.
Yes, because there's going to be a lot longer process than just the sentencing hearing. After the sentencing hearing, of course, there is the journey through prison, and it's very helpful to learn a little bit about that and what is going to be the best possible outcome. It's also helpful to learn about what's going to happen on the other side of the prison journey while you're on supervised release. And the more guidance that you can provide or you can get, the better you can prepare yourself, the better your family can feel prepared, and you put yourself in a position to be more successful. Tell me about your working. So I'm not clear so well on what you did with Justin. Could you tell me a little bit about how you and Justin have worked together and what other people could expect if they chose to work directly with him or other people on his team?
So I had, like I said, I had started working with Justin well into my sentencing, and I actually didn't work with him. I got turned on to him. So I had started watching a lot of his videos and a lot of his, a lot of his material. And you know what, Michael? I apologize? I have somebody calling me. It's an important call. Do you mind if we pause for a second and just pick up where
let's go ahead and pause, and I'll call you back, or you just send me a text and I'll pick up from there.
Thank you.
All right, bye. So we're talking with Max. We had to break for a moment, and I was asking him what videos that he saw or what did he see that was helpful to him in working with Justin, and in the spirit of wanting to help more people. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you learned, what your process was, and what you think we could do better to help more people who are going into the system?
So the videos, like I said, I got turned on to Justin pretty late in the process. I was already in my sentencing phase, and I actually ended up retaining him even later than that because his wife was giving birth to their second. So so it was, but the videos that mainly really assisted me were the sentencing videos, because that's a very, very big part of this. And it's almost really the key part once you've taken a plea deal. And so after that, that's really going to be the part that takes the most impact on you. And obviously, it'll be the most impact on everybody, because that's going to dictate how much time you're going to do, how much money you will owe, how much of a impact this is going to be on your sort of real life.
And so how did those videos help you? What did you do that you may not have done had you not watched them?
So what those videos made me realize, and one of the biggest key takeaways from them that I got, was that ultimately the judge is going to be this final arbiter in your case. And so what you need to be doing is you need to be preparing and positioning yourself and making sure that the judge hears you. And by that I mean not what your lawyer is going to say about you, not what the PSR is going to say about you, but what you're going to say about you. And you really want to make sure that the judge, because really your life is sort of in their hands, is the judge is going to hear that. And obviously there's a lot more that can be said, and it can't be said in 10 minutes, but there's a lot of preparation that I really wish I started even earlier, but with the limited amount of time that I had, I think I did very well with that.
What were you expecting to get when you started in this criminal justice proceeding? What kind of time were you expecting to get?
So, if we're talking about really in the beginning of this process, I didn't know what it was going to be. Like I said, the government charges you, with a smorgasbord of everything that they can think of. And a lot of these things have very scary numbers attached to it.
Sure do.
And so even though I knew that my role was minimal, I also knew that they kind of had me dead to rights. And so it was very stressful in a sense that I didn't know what I was going to get. I didn't really know, because again, my attorney didn't even get to the whole levels, and he didn't get to the much later part of PSR, of levels, of things that there's so many different factors that affect your time. He never really got to that. And again, I'm not trying to sort of talk down about him. I think he did an excellent job for what he was supposed to do. But what people facing this situation really need is someone who has a bird's eye view of the process. And I mean someone that's been through the entire process, so that they can sort of advise you on the later things much earlier in the process.
Yes, every decision a person makes has ancillary consequences, and I know that Justin is very good at helping people understand those consequences. Well, before you started to get that level of guidance or advice and start, whether you got it through video or talking directly with Justin, what was your expectation of sentencing?
So again, my expectation was completely across the board. You know, it's a very stressful time. So if you're feeling good, you think you're going to do great, and the judge will take pity on you, and you'll just go home probation. And then if you're feeling really bad, and you know, and it's a dark moment in your life, you may start to think you're going to be there for 10 to 20 years because that's what these numbers say. So it was a very stressful and scary process. Originally, like I said, well, in the beginning, I didn't know what it was going to be. It was a very wide range. Once it started getting more narrowed down, it was starting to appear that it was somewhere in the 3+ year range.
And what did you ultimately get?
Ultimately, I received a sentence of 18 months.
So it's a pretty big victory for you. If you were expecting 3 years at the downside, 20 years on the upside, and you end up getting less than the 3 years, that's congratulatory. I'm happy for you.
That's very true. Thank you very much. And without sounding like a commercial, I would like to say that a very, very, very large percentage of that outcome was because of the videos that I watched.
I'm very happy to hear that. What other videos could we produce for somebody like you that may give you that level of confidence that you're continuing to get good guidance? I know that Justin puts a lot of time and effort in presenting great content that's going to help people, but you're somebody who's just fresh going in. You're going in tomorrow, as you said, in less than 24 hours. What more would you like to know? Is there anything that you'd like to ask me to get a second? This is the first time we've spoken. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me that might be of value to other people going in?
You know, I think the biggest value, I think if there's anything that I would think would be an even greater value, is getting to this much earlier in the process. And I really regret that I didn't start with an overall consultant or an overall plan and instead just jumped into lawyer selection versus really thinking about sort of the whole process. And I think if there's any, all of your content is great. You know, a lot of this is very helpful. And even some of the things that don't necessarily apply to me, I can see that they would apply to others in different situations. And the content was excellent. If anything, it's trying to catch the process much earlier. A lot of this was my own, after going through it as my own experience, I realized this, and I hope listeners will realize that as well, is that even if it's just reaching out to somebody, to talk to somebody that has been through the entire process instead of just immediately jumping, lawyer is going to take care of everything, would be a tremendous amount of help to anyone facing this type of a situation.
That's some excellent guidance, and I'm really happy that you were able to find that guidance through Justin and the team that he's put together. And I hope that you have a successful journey inside. Could you tell me a little bit about what's going to be the outcome for you on the other side of this journey? What do you expect to do with your life?
Well, as Justin had advised, and I think it's an excellent way of thinking of things. You want to think of this time hopefully as a transitional period, and that's the way I'm taking it. I'm thinking of this time not as some sort of, you know, I have to do this time, but I'm thinking of this time as little stepping stone in my overall life, so that I don't kind of get hung up on it. So I've made a big book list. I'm thinking about things that I'm going to be doing once I'm released, and also what I'm going to be doing inside to help me achieve that.
That's great. Well, I think that you're going to have a successful journey. You're fortunate that you're going to the Taft, the minimum security prison in Taft. It's a pretty sweet spot for people who have to go there. I was there for 5 years. Know that place well. And when we have other friends that are going into the prison, we like to hook them up. So if I know anybody that's going to Taft, I'm going to have them look you up, Max, and you'll be able to show them around.
I would love nothing more than help someone in the process. And
well, you're helping a lot of people right now. Just the advice that you've given is helpful to let people know how much value you found in working with Justin and his team and watching those videos, and whether you retain him or not. It's really important for people going in, not only to find a consultant, but to find the right consultant. There's a lot of people out here that masquerade as experts as if they know what they're really going through. But the reality is this is a serious time for somebody's life, and you've got to find somebody that you can trust. You got to find somebody who's going to give away a lot of content and let people see what they can expect. And I know that's something that Justin feels very strongly about, is giving away a ton of free content and helping people, whether they can retain him or not. But if you put the work in like you did, you're going to get a great outcome. And I'm very happy for you, Max, and for your family, because that 18 months is going to pass really quickly.
Thank you very much, Michael. And what you said is very true. You have to, if you're selecting a consultant, and you should be thinking about a consultant very early on, you want to, obviously, my personal recommendation would be Justin. Just
He's
anybody
talking about
that
Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice and Prison Professors. We're very proud to be working with him, and we're very grateful that you had a good outcome. But continue. I want you to give Justin his your presentation. That's awesome.
That's very true. My personal advice would absolutely be Justin. And you know, you're very correct when you say this, that a good way of figuring out who is going to be a good fit and a good consultant for you is who will tell you things without a fee, who isn't going to hide behind some sort of magic voodoo or something that they're going to do special, when the reality is nobody is going to do anything for you in this journey. You will have to do things yourself, but if you hire Justin, you will have someone who will give you the best opportunity to succeed by yourself.
That's awesome. That's really kind of you to say that, and we appreciate this review and testimonial that you're providing for him. And we're, both of us, although this is the first time you and I have spoken, both Justin and I are going to give you great wishes. I assume that you'll continue hearing from him as you go through this journey. And I look forward to shaking your hand sometime on the other side, because it's going to pass relatively quickly. You said you're in real estate. I'm in the real estate business myself. Just love to continue providing content to people going into the system so that they can get the best possible outcome, just as I have had and just as everybody who's worked with our team has had.